My name is Tobias Reckling. I'm the team manager of knowledge exchange at the University of Vienna and also co-coordinating the UNICA working group on UNICA and the city. So in this function, I'm honored to moderate now already the second UNICA and EUTOPIA webinar on citizen science. So first of all, thanks to the organizers from UNICA, Laura and Flor from the EUTOPIA project and everyone else involved in organizing this event, and also to all the speakers present here. So this webinar will be structured in 3 parts. First, Katharina Buse from the European Research Executive Agency will start with a short presentation on citizen and societal engagement, a policy and program priority for the European Commission. Following this brief input from the perspective of the European funding level, we will continue with a table discussion with 5 experts from very different institutional and national backgrounds. And finally, we have an open floor for your questions to the experts. So we know that there are already many questions were submitted for registration forms, and more will come to the chat, but I will ask all of you to hold on with your questions till this final round. Before we start, however, we would like to know a bit more about you, your expectations for being here, and therefore I would like to hand over to my colleague Laura from UNICA, who will start a very brief interactive Mentimeter session. So Laura, please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm sending in the chat. You should connect to Mentimeter, www.menti.com with the code 7239093. My screen. Okay, so the first question is, what country are you from? So also the code is on the top of our page. Austria, Belgium. Spain, Hungary, France, okay, some countries are represented. Okay, I think we can proceed. Second question, are you currently engaged in citizen science or in a citizen science project? And you can reply between yes, okay. And I'm currently working on a project plan application, yes. And the project is currently up and running, no, but I have been in the past, no, but I'm interested in starting a project. Okay. Okay, so the people interested in starting a project are leading. Thank you very much for replying. And finally, what is your position? Are you a project coordinator or manager? Are you part of a researcher's team? Are you in charge of communication, in charge of funding, in charge of relationships with the stakeholders involved, or other? And if it's other, please specify in the chat. Thank you. Okay, we have 2 others. If you don't mind, please, can you specify in the chat? Okay. People are trying. So we have many project coordinators or managers. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. You can continue replying if you wish. I will leave the presentation open during all the webinar. And now I give back the screen to Tobias. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Good to get to know you a bit more. So now we'll continue, as I already said, with a presentation by Katharina Buse on citizen science and societal engagement, the policy and program priority for the European Commission. Katharina is a project advisor within the unit reforming European research innovation and research infrastructure of the European Research Executive Agency. So she's the main interlocutor for the citizen science portfolio funded under Horizon 2020 and now under Horizon Europe. Before joining the European Research Executive Agency, Katharina has notably worked for the European Commission and the European External Action Service in policy and program management positions, so very experienced in European funding organizations. Following overview of the main policy objectives under Horizon Europe, Katharina will outline a presentation, key features for and excellence of citizen science and society engagement in Horizon Europe project activities. So with a presentation, Katharina will give a first input. Afterwards, we will take questions rising from a presentation and also other questions for our following table discussion. So Katharina, many thanks for being here, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you very much, Tobias, and thank you very much as well for the organizers. It is a true pleasure for me to be with you today. And I'm going to brief as quickly as Tobias has already mentioned on why citizen science and societal engagement is a policy and a program priority for the European Commission, and notably for Horizon Europe, the research funding framework for 2021-2027, and then the implications indeed stemming from this. So let me start on the why. While I'm most likely preaching to the converted here, I would nevertheless stress three elements on why the European Commission promotes citizen science and societal engagement. First of all, we consider that it contributes to excellence. I will not list the different points here. We also believe that it really increases the effectiveness of research and innovation. And here I would like to insist on one point, which is really fostering behavioral changes in institutions and the general public. And this is really important now when looking at the Green Deal or the Sustainable Development Goals. And here we believe that behavioral changes of consumers or industries are really part of the solution that we are trying to achieve. And finally, promoting citizen science and societal engagement also improve the relationship between science and society. I think we really have seen that in the past 2 years as well with the pandemic, that it's really, really important as well to increase trust of society in the process and the outputs of research and innovation, and by doing so also to help to respond to the increased science denial. Promoting citizen and societal engagement is really an integral part of the EU open science policy. Open science goes far beyond open access, as it's sometimes understood. It's really an approach based on open cooperative work and the systematic sharing of knowledge and tools, and this as early and widely as possible in the research and innovation process. And open science practices include involving all relevant knowledge actors, such as citizens, civil society, and end users, in the co-creation of research and innovation agendas and contexts. So engagement here really is the key element of open science. Societal engagement is also at the core of the new European research area, which has been revamped recently. You might all be familiar with the Council conclusions of December 2020 on the new European research area, where the Council called on member states and the Commission to organize at least every 2 years a Europe-wide citizen science campaign, and this also in synergy with the Horizon Europe missions. I will talk about the missions a little bit later on. How is this really reflected as well in the new framework program for research in Horizon Europe? First of all, citizen and societal engagement is foreseen across the program, and particularly in the clusters and the mission. So it's really about mainstreaming. And then as well, we have under the first era work program, 2 topics that are trying to put in place key pillars of support to citizen science. And these 2 calls, the ERA 60 call and the ERA 61 calls, have been closed last September. We are currently preparing the grant agreements to provide funding to the proposals that have been selected. And I would really here insist notably on the topic 61, the upcoming project on supporting and giving recognition to citizen science in the European research area, because this project will provide funding to 100 citizen science initiatives to be kickstarted and to 25 citizen science initiatives to be sustained. And for the first time as well, there will be an award of a European Citizen Science Prize as well in the coming years. So a total of 9 million euro for the first work program for the period 2021-22 has been set aside for citizen science initiatives and projects. Then an important part of Horizon Europe are also the EU missions. And the missions are really an experimental way of doing research and innovation. So what is a mission? A mission is really a portfolio of actions that are intended to achieve a bold and inspirational as well as measurable goal within a set time frame. And here the idea really is to have different kind of actions that bring together different stakeholders, different actors, but they all work together to tackle a broad societal challenges. And what can we expect under a mission? It's really about bringing research, basic research, research on governance issues, multi-actor approaches, citizen science together with the aim of reaching these missions. So what are the missions? There are 5 missions that have been set. It's notably the adaptation to climate change, cancer, healthy oceans, sea, coastal and inland waters, climate neutral and smart cities, and also soil, health and food. And really in all these areas, we expect to see citizen and social engagement to help support them and really to make a difference. So this brings me really to the key features for citizen science and social engagement in Horizon Europe. So as I already mentioned, open science is the key modus operandi of the entire program. So it's about open collaborative approaches that should be fostered. And also social engagement is now considered part of the excellence criterion under methodology during proposal evaluation. So engagement practices by applicants or proposals will be evaluated for all topics, and this regardless of whether they mention engagement itself or not. So this is an important difference compared to Horizon 2020. And here the idea behind is really to give engagement the correct amount of thought by applicants really straight away. And again, this is an important change compared to the former Horizon 2020 program. And then as well, co-design, co-creation, and engagement of civil society organizations mainstreamed across the program. And there are many opportunities under the first work programs that for funding. These opportunities do not always come under the terminology of citizen science, but you can really look for, let's say, keywords like multi-actor engagement, multi-stakeholder, co-creation, and all these terms indicate opportunities for funding for citizen science. Another key feature really is as well that one of the 9 pathways to impact, the KPI, the key performance indicator number 6, starts with citizens and end users co-creating knowledge and innovations. And this with the goal of developing solutions and knowledge that are taken up by society. And this is really, really a strong statement as well under Horizon Europe on how to involve citizens on achieving impact. And here we can really see that the new program is a big step change compared to Horizon 2020. Now, against this backdrop, really, what does it mean for you when considering applying for EU funding under Horizon Europe? Really try to target real life needs, problems, opportunities. So try to link it as well to the EU missions. Try to choose consortium partners with complementary types of knowledge and skills as well. And this to foster cross-fertilization as well. And also try to involve multipliers. That means people who can bring in practical knowledge and help disseminate the results in the long term. And also have just listed some further food for thought on citizen science engagement or societal engagement when you try to apply or consider applying for EU funding or for citizen science funding as such. Really try to consider the level of engagement you're aiming at. Do you intend to start from scratch, meaning to initiate new citizen science initiatives, or do you rather consider linking up with existing ones? What types of engagement are you considering as well? Co-design, co-creation, or co-assessment, or a kind of, let's say, a mixed formula as well. Try to consider as well and to outline as much as possible how to intend to measure and to monitor impact as well. Try to aim at fostering institutional changes. This is an important point as well. Try as well to build in a kind of feedback loop to respond to citizens and to communicate results as well. So not only to involve citizens to co-design your research, but also to provide them feedback on maybe how you try to influence policy as well. And then consider as well how your project can be sustainable in the long term as well when the funding will come to an end. And then one point as well, which is important as Cascade Funding. This means that projects provide the opportunity to provide funding to small scale initiatives as well. And when you apply to funding from Horizon Europe that includes Cascade Funding, really stick to the conditions of the work program. That goes maybe without saying, but I nevertheless wanted to mention it here. And when apply for projects that offer Cascade Funding, I really look to into the core requirements. But all this is also laid down in a program guide. So I have listed some links for further information where you can get back to at a later stage as well. And the presentation will of course be made available. So I'm of course happy to reply to answer any questions that you might have, and I really look forward to our discussions and especially as well to hear the inputs and contributions of the other panelists. So I hand back the floor to Tobias. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katharina. And now we already also to start our panel discussion. We have prepared a couple of questions. I will ask each questions to 2 to 3 speakers already present. And if the other speakers want to add something, we'll just ask them to raise their hand. And I will start with Katharina. We should not forget that citizen science is basically a scientific method and also can be applied to more generic research projects. Oh, sorry, I forgot something in the beginning. First of all, of course, we should start with introducing our speakers. I'm so sorry about it. I'm just about asking all the questions. So our panelists, please introduce yourselves very briefly. Katharina did already introduce herself, so I would ask Florian, just go ahead and then we just go around.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tobias. I was asked to prepare a slide, so I will share my screen with a slide. I hope this works. Yeah. So my name is Florian Heigl, and I'm working at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences, Vienna in Austria. I'm a senior scientist with a focus on citizen science and ecology. One of my projects is the roadkill project, where we collect data on roadkill animals in Austria together with the general public. And in this project, you can participate in the whole research process, from formulating the research question to publishing the results. I am also a researcher and trainer in citizen science, which means that we in our team are doing science of citizen science. For example, one of our focus is on quality criteria for citizen science projects, but we are also providing trainings at our university and beyond for researchers on how they can apply citizen science in their own research. I'm one of the founders and coordinators of the Citizen Science Network Austria, with 44 partners at the moment. These partners are not only universities, but also NGOs, museums, public authorities, foundations, etc. So it's quite a diverse network here in Austria. And one important part of the network is the online platform Österreich forscht. We founded this platform in our free time during our PhD in 2014. But since then we were able to further develop the platform and are now getting permanent funding from our university to host and coordinate the platform and the network. And on Österreich forscht, we are listing more than 60 projects from various disciplines and institutions, provide general information on citizen science, and have also an interactive blog, which can be used by all project leaders on the platform. The general public can comment, follow, or like the blog posts. Yeah, and so this was my introduction of myself, and now I'm really looking forward to a lively discussion.
Only after we have introduced all panelists, of course. Thank you, Florian. So, Annelies, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I will also share my screen. Okay. Just put you back here. I'm Annelies. I'm the coordinator of the Flemish Knowledge Center for Citizen Science. And we aim to support current or future citizen science projects in Flanders. So we give talks and workshops on citizen science. We provide individual advice for projects on all kinds of topics: communication, data, funding. Also a question often comes up. So we created some practical guides, for example, on data management or on communication to group some questions that often come back. And we organize events. We try to provide some networking opportunities to build a strong citizen science network in Flanders. And we also hope to connect it and make interactions with the international citizen science network. And then on the other hand, we also have a few activities towards the general public. We are trying to organize a transcribe-a-thon. It's now the 3rd time in a row, and we hope that this fall COVID will not be an issue anymore. We have an expo on citizen science, which travels from library to library in Flanders. And we also have our own citizen science project on artificial intelligence, AMAI. So one of the main questions that we get is on funding, citizen science funding. So we try to keep a bit of an overview of available citizen science funding in Flanders and in Europe, and we try to group it on our website. You can always go and check if there are any interesting calls for you, and then we help people to apply for it. But what we mainly want to do is convince people to also just use a citizen science approach in regular science funding. And we help them, we give some tips and tricks to deal with jury members that in some domains might not yet be familiar with citizen science approach, such as add some successful examples of citizen science, define it a bit, especially anticipate critical questions about data quality and experimental setup, and explain in much more detail than you would normally do how you will deal with this data quality if it's measured by citizens. Also for the budget, explain in more details what you need the budget for, because they might be extra critical for it. So I hope this will be some food for the discussion later on.
Thank you. I'm sure it will be. Marzia, do you want to continue?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Let me just share quickly my presentation. Here it goes. I hope it's working. Yes, my name is Marzia. I'm a co-founder of a company called Stickydot. We are actually based in Brussels, but we do work also at a very international level. So we are active both in Belgium and all over Europe. What we focus on is what we like in a very broad sense, science and society. So we do specialize in multi-stakeholder engagement processes. So bringing together different type of actors, of people who would normally do not interact so much or would need support to make this interaction be very fruitful and lead to both policy or shared policy or research ideas. We use different type of methodologies. Citizen science is one of them, but we also work a lot on co-design, co-creation, and we also have some activities regarding evaluation of science engagement activities. We really like very much implementing participatory processes, facilitating them, and in particular at the moment we are also leading a EU-funded project that is focused on open innovation. It's called Mosaic, and we bring co-creation and multi-stakeholder processes within one of the missions that was mentioned by Katharina, that is the climate neutral and smart cities mission. So we are working with several cities who are engaged into achieving climate neutrality by 2030. I was also asked to share with you what type of expertise that I have that might be useful for you. In my view, I think compared to the other panelists, maybe I have less of on-the-ground experience, so in implementing directly citizen science processes, but I do have and still work a lot on, let's say, the whole very broad picture of all the institutions that are getting more and more involved in citizen science. So I collaborate regularly with networks such as EXA. I was involved in the creation of the EU Citizen Science Platform, for example, where we as Stickydot are still active, and we actually partner in one of the two projects that was mentioned by Katharina that is going to follow up on the future of this platform. It's part of my work to follow very closely all this, I call them citizen science trends, in the sense that there are a lot of changes happening very quickly. You might have noticed that citizen science has become very popular lately. So it's really part of my daily work to keep up with all the advancements and what changes in the different countries, also at European level. And I work a lot on EU-funded projects. So also in this case, I am confronted very regularly with writing proposals, getting projects funded, and then implementing them. So I think this is what I will be focusing mostly in my contributions today. Thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing. Here we go.
Thanks for being here. And our last panelist, John, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Coaffee. I'm a professor in the politics department in the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Warwick, which is the university bang in the centre of the UK. My background is in urban geography and urban planning, and I guess for the last 25 years or so, I've been working with local communities to address a range of questions around risk and vulnerability, and those are very much focused on this sort of discipline of community planning, which was about collecting citizen viewpoints and feeding these back into policy development. And that's quite an old, well-established tradition. More recently, I guess in the last 10 years or so, moving towards this idea of citizen science, looking with a focus, I guess, on citizen-generated data and volunteer geographical information, all again linked to this idea of thinking about how we respond to disasters and natural hazards. And this is about, for example, engaging citizens to understand or to help their understanding of risks and vulnerabilities they face, and also to think through some data collection opportunities with citizens. It's about improving two-way communication between citizens on one hand, and on the other hand, officials who are involved in civil protection opportunities. And I've been engaged in a range of projects, both in the global north and the global south. We've got some projects ongoing at the moment in Brazil and Colombia, which are very much using traditional community engagement techniques alongside the cutting edge VGI opportunities around apps, participant mapping, etc. And one of the reasons I guess I was invited here is I've written a project which was funded in the last round of Horizon 2020 called Risk Pack, which is about integrating risk perception and action to enhance civil protection and citizen interaction. And this is very much about bringing citizen voices together with civil protection voices and enhancing overall community and disaster resilience.
Thank you, John. So let's start with our panel discussion. And our first question goes to Katharina and then to the rest of the round. I mean, besides everything else which is expected from citizen science, it's still a scientific method in order to gather data. So it can be used for all kinds of projects. So what is the difference between funding programs specifically aimed and designed for citizen science and more general programs where citizen science nevertheless also could be applied as a scientific method?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tobias, for the question. I think on my side, I really just would like to let's say highlight, I think, two points that are important. Really, we have seen in Horizon 2020 a kind of specific approach with the SWAFs, Science with and for Society project, that many of today's participants are also involved at. And here we really try as well, to build trust in science, leverage as well vast social intelligence and capabilities to conduct research and innovation, and also to do so to kind of tackle important challenges in terms of development of tools, networks and instruments, and really to improve as well responsible research and innovation, but also have, let's say, training, capacity building, mutual learning activities, and also the creation of the network that Marzia was referring to. Whereas now in Horizon Europe, we will still have, of course, the kind of dedicated funding lines as well, literally with the two topics that I mentioned beforehand, on the brokering the network and kickstarting in society and sustaining citizen science initiatives. But really here the idea is to kind of to mainstream it, to include it, to have this broader focus, which really should aim at reinforcing the involvement of citizens in research programs and in defining as well the research questions to make science more socially relevant, and also to increase, let's say, the ownership of policy making by involving citizens, and as well the increased prevalence of, let's say, evidence-based policy making. Let me stop here.
Thank you, Katharina. So I would continue to forward this question to John. John, have you ever had any experience in trying to apply citizen science in specific citizen science funding schemes or non-specific science funding schemes? Is there any difference from your perspective, how to use this method?
I mean, most of in fairness, most of the work that I've applied to has partially engages with citizen science, so it's not a specific citizen science scheme itself. What myself and my team have tried to do is to apply citizen engagement, citizen science methods to particular problems or challenges that we find and apply for funding in that way. So we're not necessarily applying directly for citizen science starred projects, for example, the ones that we've typed, such as the ones that we've heard a little bit about. So I mean, there may be others on the call that perhaps have more success at applying for those specific types of projects.
Mm-hmm. May I ask Annelies or Marzia, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, on one hand, we assisted the Flemish government in putting together a specific citizen science funding call. And I think differences with applying citizen science in a regular funding, for example, are the type of questions that you're expected to answer. Also, the experience of the reviewers. They put experienced reviewers there who know citizen science, who will be critical about citizen science, but also very open for the citizen science approach. While if you apply for regular funding, you kind of need to promote the citizen science aspect yourself. Well, it depends really on the domain that you're in. If it's biodiversity, then everybody will be familiar with citizen science and it's just as good as any other approach. If it's mathematics, for example, might be that no one has ever heard of citizen science, and you really need to put extra effort in convincing them that involving citizens is the right approach for your project, and that you really need it, and that it requires funding, and that it requires time, and that it requires communication efforts. So then you need to educate the reviewers maybe a little bit, and that's really good to keep it in mind when writing your proposal.
So your main point is it's a question of who reviews the proposals in the end, how aware they are of citizen science. Marzia and Florian, would you agree with this comment?
Yeah, definitely. I join what Annelies just mentioned, and also I think the type of work that is needed, the workload, let's say, in preparing a proposal or developing an idea is very different when you're applying for a specific citizen science goal. As Annelies said, everyone is already kind of on board. It's very specific, so that if you don't share already an expertise, at least you share intentions. So normally you don't have to spend time getting a shared understanding, for example, of what citizen science is, etc. While, for example, well, I'm referring to my experience in EU-funded projects. What happens is that we often get groups of researchers who reach out to us, who are building, for example, a proposal for EU funding, and they clearly see in the strategic guidelines that they have to do some type of citizen engagement, but they have never done so before. And it's great, of course, that they reach out to experts in this and they look for this expertise. But at least for us, for example, is a much bigger workload in terms of preparation that you have to take into account, because you have to do a whole preparatory work to make sure that everyone is on board and to make sure that there is a clear understanding, a shared understanding. And from that point on, you can build your activities that you plan to do if the project gets funded. And that preparatory time is much bigger in when you're addressing a call that is not specifically already saying, yeah, that's funding is to do citizen science. I love the challenge. I think it's a big, really nice challenge, and I like it very much. But I think it's also important to know that it's going to take you more time.
Especially if it gets funded, it's a great challenge in the end. Florian, you have a final comment?
I totally agree with Annelies and Marzia. What I would like to add is that if you apply with a citizen science project for a general funding program, you really have to write about citizen science so that it is not about outsourcing workload. Yeah, some researchers still believe that doing citizen science is outsourcing work, but on the contrary, it is a lot of work to implement a citizen science project, to start a community, to maintain the community. So citizen science is absolutely not outsourcing workload.
Okay. Yeah, we'll continue with the question. It's actually, I guess, the holy grail. So what makes a good research proposal? What to do in order to get it funded? It's rather the question rather goes in the direction of what to think, which things to consider, which at first thought might be less obvious in order to convince the funding agency that the proposals were funding. But in the end, often reviewers decide unless the funding agency. So how to convince the reviewers? So I will give this question to the group and ask Katharina what you think about all the comments you got from our panelists. So Annelies, what do you think? What makes a good citizen science funding proposal? Which things to consider?
Lots of things to consider for a good citizen science proposal. I will just share some mistakes that we sometimes see. Is don't underestimate the communication work, the workload. You need a lot of time for it, and time requires budget. You also need budget for visuals or platforms or whatever. One of the things we always hear from citizen science projects when they finished is, whoa, we totally underestimated how much time we would spend on communicating. So that's one of the things. And maybe the other thing is think about your data well in advance and describe what data you will capture, in what formats, how you will make it open. There is a lot of focus on open science, also on open data, open publications, and it's something different than just putting your Excel file on your website and saying here you can download it. Try to do more with your data than only that, and also take that into account from the start, because it will make everything so much easier. And maybe one final point is, think about why you need citizen science. Do you need citizen science? I love citizen science, but I also think it's important to only apply it when your project needs it. Don't do citizen science because it's a hot topic. Do citizen science because it fits your project, and have an answer to why it fits with your project.
One might add, don't just apply for funding scheme because it's citizen science in there. John, is there anything, let's say, you learned from all your research proposals? What was the difference between the successful ones or less successful ones when it comes to citizen science?
Yeah, I mean, very much similar to Annelies. I think this is about preparation. This is about, these are projects, the ones that I've got have been years in the making. So it's really about understanding the context in which you wish to work. So in my case, this could be understanding particular local communities, whether those are in the UK, whether those are in Brazil or across Europe. Really have a deep engagement with those communities well in advance of thinking about applying for funding. And I think the key word that a number of colleagues have used this morning is this idea of co-design is really important. Bringing in local citizens right at the very beginning of you having the idea of a project, and begin working with them throughout the the design and the production of a grant proposal, and then thinking very carefully within that, putting together that grant proposal about what type of data you're going to get, how you're going to collect that, how you're going to represent that data, and how you're going to then, I think as Katharina was talking about, this feedback loop between what citizens collect and the policymakers. How do we, if you like, square that circle? So very much, you know, deep engagement over the long term is in my experience anyway, a key to success.
May I ask, so do you have let's say an open science approach when it comes to proposal writing? So do you share your proposal already, researchers with the citizens involved already at that stage? Yeah,
very much so. Or we, you know, often we would go into the local community, organize a workshop, talk with local people, get a sense of what their issues are. So I think most of the research that I've done has always been, you know, problem driven or challenge driven. So it's about really trying to understand what those challenges are and how those manifest themselves on the ground, and then working through what some of the issues that citizens have with those challenges, and then working with them to address those.
Thank you. So Marzia, anything you want to add here? How did you go? What's your important point about making your proposal successful?
Yes, so I think it's quite in line with what colleagues have already mentioned. We always try to make, in the proposals we write, we always try to make very specific two things, very, very explicit, not specific. On one side, the societal relevance of what we are going to do. I think we have seen that this is becoming more and more important. So it's very, very important to not implied, but really we explain it at length. And maybe in one of the next questions, I can also hint a bit at how to make this societal relevance more visible in proposals. And then what we do is also we try as much as we can to link what we're going to do to strategic priorities, whether it's at EU level or at local level. So we could hear from Katharina that there are some very key important strategic priorities within the context of Horizon Europe. It's the same at local level. A lot of regional government, for example, they regularly publish and update strategic plans in terms of their objectives for research and innovation, etc. So it's really important, in my opinion, to read these documents when you write your proposal. Sometimes you feel that what maybe you're doing is not connected to this, but I think when you can show how you're contributing within your city, within your local environment to achieving these strategic priorities that governments or funding bodies in general have set for the years to come, I think it really gives it a push in many senses. And I totally join Annelies and John on the two issues they have mentioned, and especially for the citizen engagement. I think what John just explained is also, I totally relate to that.
It's of course also very resource intensive when you involve citizens already in the proposal phase. So Florian, I mean, you're running a citizen science network in Austria, so you're talking to all kinds of other project leaders, PIs of citizen science project. Is there anything from all your discussions with other projects you have learned? What makes a proposal successful?
Yeah, thank you, Tobias. I mean, I have two hats, so I will put now the hat as a researcher on, and I would like to ask again John, because this was quite interesting for me to hear that you are involving citizen scientists in proposal writing. How do you explain the citizens that it takes, I don't know, a year or so until your project is funded, if you're lucky? And how do you explain that there is a 80% chance or so that the project isn't funded? So how do you deal with that in the work at the beginning?
Well, I think for some of the projects, the work would be undertaken anyway. So if you're setting up a sort of an engagement with local communities, you're doing that work anyway. It's not dependent upon a project coming. The project, you know, getting a funded project is a cherry on top of the cake, if you like, that will allow you to really speed up and deepen the work that you're doing. But yes, I agree, there are problems of explaining to them about the very small chance of getting research funding. So we engage them in the writing process, of course, and we develop with them some of the ideas for the project, but we don't expect them to carry the burden of any writing as such. That's done by us, but very much reflecting their viewpoints. But yes, it is a problem, of course.
Okay, thank you very much for this honest answer, because it's the same experience we made. It's really hard to do this co-creation, co-design. It reads very easy and great, but it's really hard to implement in your daily work as a researcher. Yeah, and to put on my other hat as a trainer, a central question we always ask in our trainings is what added value is for the scientific staff involved, and what added value should there be for the citizen scientists involved. So these 2 points of views are very important, I think, to write a proposal. So in other words, what is the advantage of the citizen science approach compared to a classical method, as also Annelies said before? And an important part is also the point of view of a citizen scientist. So why should I participate in this project? What do I have from that? So, and if you have these 2 points of views in your head and writing a proposal, I think you cover quite a big area.
Yeah, thank you. So, Katharina, after you've heard all these comments from the funding agency's perspective, so what makes, from your perspective, what makes a good proposal?
I think all the relevant points really have been listed here by the different panelists, and I think this is really something that we see in proposals that receive funding, that the citizen science engagement has really been thought through in terms of engagement, in terms of the methodology on how to participate, as well in terms of kind of the challenges that they're addressing. And I think that the last point by Florian really, I think, summed it up quite nicely. So what is in for the scientists, but also for the citizens scientists as well. And then, of course, I mean, a very important point as well mentioned by Marzia is the societal relevance, and how the proposal as well links to the strategic priorities of the European Commission of the work program as well. And here really, again, I would like to refer the different participants to the topic description as well, and the work program. The work program is always for 2 years, and then it sets out the different topics and funding opportunities. And maybe another important point as well is maybe the extent as well to which knowledge or lessons learned from the project could maybe be scaled up, meaning be applicable as well to other countries or contexts as well, or maybe to the extent as well to which multiple case studies as well are involved. So looking at specific situations in different contexts, different countries by different research institutions as well, and how really to increase the knowledge base.
Thank you very much. The next question, it's about how institutions can support successful applications for citizen science projects. So mainly, I guess, I mean, John and Florian, you're both university-based, but also Marzia, if I may ask you first, is there anything you, from your experience or maybe from your cooperation partners, how institutions can actively support successful citizen science applications?
Yeah, when this question always makes me think of an experience we had some time ago where we had a couple of very young PhD students who came to our office. They were really excited because they, in a local university in Belgium, they had got funding to do some citizen science, but basically within the university, no one was paying any attention to them. Not only they were being looked at as a bit the weirdos of the university, and I guess maybe some of the listeners the participants can relate to this. So I know this is changing very much, and I think also the work that UNICA is doing is pretty amazing in this sense. But I would say that first of all, I think it's very important to support this motivation. It's often young people, young researchers who decide to venture into citizen science, and they very much need support in this sense. Sometimes the support is not, I mean, it's all the obvious. So it's resources, it's training, it's networking and having the possibility to talk with other people with already experience with it. But it's also this thing of not feeling weird just for the fact of doing citizen science. I think it's something that is going to change more and more because there is more and more support towards citizen science. But I think this little change that is happening, and it's going to be a change in attitude where they were so surprised. They were saying, well, we got the funding. Normally the reaction of the university would be to be happy about it. And they actually looking at it as a bit strange because what is this citizen science? So I think this is, this is a big change that is really needed. We see it a lot also when we got involved in projects where we almost have, it's almost an emotional support that we give to researchers. Well, I'm exaggerating a bit, but you know what I mean, because it's still sometimes seen as something that doesn't have the same rigor as traditional science. So to me, this is one of the very, very important things that university environments can do to start with.
Yeah, as a research manager, I only can say it changes a lot perspective from universities when the first million comes in from a citizen science project. So it's very different then. So Florian, anything you can say from your institution? How can an institution support successful citizen science applications?
I mean, thank you, Marzia, for your comments. I totally relate to that because I was also the weirdo together with my colleague Daniel in 2014 when we started with our citizen science endeavor. But we were really lucky that our rectorate saw the potential of citizen science and they decided to fund us. So now we are in the position that our university offers numerous forms of support for citizen science through us on the one hand, because we, as I said, advise researchers on specific projects, but there are also specialized contact persons for citizen science and open science in our legal department, because this is also a very important support from our university regarding GDPR or open data or such things. In addition, as I said, we offer trainings in the field of citizen science, and this is also supported by our university. And of course, the network, the Citizen Science Network Austria, provides information on existing and completed projects, suitable partners, and helpful information on how to start a project. We even have a mentoring network set up specifically for this purpose, where project leaders offer personal support in the field of citizen science from various disciplines and all over Austria, so that people can have this personal contact and not only via email. The platform Österreich forscht, so the website, can be used by our project leaders for communication. We have some projects which do not have their own website, so they use the Österreich forscht as their communication channel, and they can also use our social media channels and don't need to set up new channels, which is very labor intensive. And last but not least, it is also very helpful that our university has anchored citizen science in official strategies. and development documents. And I think an important information on the EU level is that there is a current EU project, Time for Citizen Science, which is right now looking at what measures are needed to sustainably anchor citizen science at an institution.
And thereby we almost have reached the end, or we have reached the end of our panel discussion. So let's summarize the input from the question I just asked. So important topics are, of course, trainings within university, legal support, infrastructure, contact persons, reflection, like strategic support by university management, and last but not least, jobs for weirdos, if I may say so. Support of citizen science by the institutions. And now I would like to open up the floor for our participants to ask questions to our panelists. We already got the first question, as you can see in the chat, by John from Uganda, who basically asks how to deal with expectations by communities and citizens which you cannot meet as a project, or maybe it's not, it's related to the topic of our session here on funding, but of course it's a challenge of every citizen science project. How do you deal with expectations of your citizens and participants? So Annelies, maybe you say something on that.
I think it starts with expectation management right from the start, and don't promise things that you're not sure that you could deliver. Be clear about everything that's uncertain. Communicating uncertainty is also difficult, but I think we just need to keep on trying to communicate about everything that we will try, but are not certain that we will reach. And in the end, if it fails, just be open about it. Don't try to conceal it. Show that you may be disappointed too. You're just human also. I think that's important, that you're also just human, and some things just don't work out. Also in science, that's why it's science, because you don't know if it will work or not. You might get the results you hoped for, and you might get different results, but in the end you always learn something, even if it doesn't work. And maybe you could also stress about the things you did learn from the failure. And then the failure is not just a failure, it might also be hopefully some positive lesson that you can do something with in the future.
So transparency is key, I guess. That's what you said. John, you wanna add something of it?
I mean, I think Annelies has summed it up really well there. This is about managing expectations, but it also perhaps it differs depending on your level of engagement with the host community, if I may use that phrase, before the project starts. How well you know them. If you for example parachute yourself and your team into a local community and do some stuff with them and don't really have that deep engagement, then you may struggle with these sorts of issues that John is highlighting on his question around demotivation of local citizens. The important thing in these projects is to build the capacity of local communities to respond to whatever challenge or problem they're facing or are dealing with, and that's fundamental before you start talking about, well, what nice data we might get as researchers that we might then be able to publish papers and things like that.
Thank you. So again, to the participants, if you want to ask any question to the panelists, please do so in the chat. Otherwise, I will continue with some questions which we received before starting this panel. One question is, for instance, alternative funding resources. So could be crowdfunding, commercial partnerships with companies, other kind of partnerships. To all panelists, do you have any experience with this kind of funding resources, and what are the challenges, what are the advantages, and what are the disadvantages maybe? So Marzia, if you maybe have anything to add on that, or if you have no experience, maybe it's also your vision, how these kind of funding resources, maybe with companies, could add to successful citizen science projects.
So, as I mentioned, we work mostly with EU-funded, within the context of EU-funded initiatives. And something I really like about it is, and I think it also addressed partially the previous question, is the fact that it is strongly suggested to involve actors that are not just researchers and citizens. I think the managing the expectations of the citizens also goes with, it's also strongly related with who is involved. It's clear that if it's only researchers working with citizens, then the policy impact might be low. But if you consider, for example, so if you are addressing a specific issue where there is a public entity or a private entity, because sometimes it's really strongly connected to activities from the private sector, of course, that can make a difference regarding this issue, then what about involving them too? And I think this involving them too from the start, so being literally a partner in the project. And this is really something that have been pushed forward a lot within EU funding. And it makes a huge difference in my view. We can mention some examples of projects such as, for example, Denosis, which has tackled odor pollution that we like very much, because it has been built around this notion of you won't be able you can collect data, you can have, of course, much better and more detailed information about the issue, that's great. But then the communities that are affected by this issue, they will only see changes if industries that are polluting, if local governments are involved. So this is a suggestion that I make, and I think EU funding in this sense are really prioritizing these aspects. So definitely, for example, the cascading grants that might be coming up soon within one of the calls that were mentioned by Katharina. I think this could be definitely an added value there. And I see also lots of regional governments that are, and I'm sure Annelies can say a lot more about this, but they are really pushing forward in this direction, so that citizen science is still a great scientific endeavor, but it's also become something that really has a strong impact also at policy level. So I think that in this sense, I'm sorry, I'm a bit moving away from your question, but I think in this sense, funding schemes are more and more, let's say, coping or going in the direction of this multi-stakeholder engagement that is great. So if you can find this type of calls and you feel like addressing them, it's a bit more of a challenge, because I know it's already very difficult to involve citizens. So if you add even more actors, it gets even more challenging. But I think the rewards for all those involved at the end of the process or during the process are really interesting.
Florian, you want to add something on that, especially on crowdfunding and company corporations and citizen science projects?
Yeah, I mean, I have no experience with corporates, but a lot of people in our trainings think that the crowdfunding would be a logical step when starting a citizen science project, because you want to build up a community. So why don't start by asking the community for money for your project? But in our area, in ecology and basic research, it's really hard to start a crowdfunding campaign because you don't really have something to offer for the people participating in your crowdfunding campaign. Usually you have a product at the end of a crowdfunding campaign which you can sell for a cheaper price or whatever. But in basic research, you only can offer, I don't know, meet the scientists or do excursions or whatever. And that's not really great for a crowdfunding campaign. So in Austria, I have no example where a crowdfunding campaign led to a citizen science project, but maybe there are other experiences in this direction.
Annelies, you have raised your hand.
Yeah, not really crowdfunding, but in Flanders, I see a lot of possibilities from local authorities like cities or municipalities. And there are actually some projects who, well, they got some initial funding to start up the project, and now they keep it running by building service models for the cities. For example, there's a project on the weather and urban heat islands, and they put weather stations in cities, and it's the cities that pay a fee like €1,000 for a year or 1,500 euros for a year to keep the weather station in their city at a location that's important for them. The cities can choose, and in this way, they have now 60 cities in Flanders who pay for this, and they can pay for someone to work on it during that year. And they've been going now for 2 or 3 years on this model, and it's really great to see that they can build a business model out of it a bit for these municipalities. And there are other projects like Telram who do it for traffic counting, who also have this whole service trajectory for cities who want to measure traffic and make changes in traffic. So I think these the local authorities are really a good place to look at if you want to make your citizen science project more sustainable, if it measures something that's of interest for them, of course.
John, you have already elaborated on your local networks. Do you have experience in working with other funding sources than official funding agencies?
Not really. I mean, we offer, through our university, we offer small amounts of money to get these sorts of projects up and running, and to sort of pilot them, if you like, to see whether they may be able to sort of stick in a local community and then gain traction and then develop larger projects off those, but not generally. As for sort of crowdfunding, again, I think, like Florian's example, that's not really the sorts of things we see in the UK. Developing, projects around crowdsourced data, however, may be one way to go. We've seen in the last couple of years through the pandemic, a number of sort of medical-based projects springing up around crowdsourced data, and my guess is that that's probably piqued people's interest in being involved in a large-scale sort of scientific experiment or project, by giving their data over.
Yeah, medical research around rare diseases. There has been some developments, and where crowdfunding comes, of course, with a challenge. What happens if you don't get enough money together? What you do. There are also some administrative challenges. So, Katharina, on the EU level, are there any discussions around these topics, how to involve maybe companies in the citizen science projects, and what are from your perspective also the challenges of these additional actors when it comes to citizen science projects?
Yeah, I think it's rather maybe a question for the policy officer at the European Commission, who are drafting the topics and the work program. I can just really maybe come in here from, let's say, my practical experiences in implementing the project that we are currently funding under Horizon 2020. What we have seen so far, and it really goes into the direction of what the previous panelists have been saying. We sometimes have seen crowdfunding, but it's rather, let's say, a kind of a side product of a project. We have a very successful and interesting gender project as well, where developed a board game around gender stereotypes and roles in research and innovation. And that's the Gearing Roles project, and it's the Noble Run board game, so really about female scientists. This kind of, again, it came out of the project as a side project. It was crowdfunded and very successful, and then taken up again. We, of course, I mean, as Annelies has been saying, with other projects, their local funding by municipalities that are very important. Also, maybe with other institutional partners, that is something that we have seen as well, for at least for one of my projects as well, with an international organization as well, that is coming in and supporting. But really, again, I mean, this is for a project that is already ongoing and addressing specific aspects or parts of the project to achieve maybe sustainability and to develop the project even further, but it's not at the initial phase of the project itself, and it's not part, let's say, of the application at the proposal stage per se.
Thank you. And there's also a question for Katharina in the chat by Josefa Gonzalez, but I would ask Josefa to briefly elaborate on what you mean, which two topics, so I can take up this question a bit later. Or Katharina, do you already know?
I think, if I may, that the question refers to the presentation I gave, where I made reference to two specific topics that are being funded under the 2021-2022 work program for the European research area. And no, usually, I mean, what is kind of, let's say, the best practice is that under each work program, which covers a period of 2 years, we have topics which address different issues from a different perspective, except maybe for some open access or gender projects. Generally, it's really about topics that are not repeating itself. So these two topics are not going to be in new calls in the future as such, but with a slightly, yeah, we'll see under the 2023-24 what is upcoming. The work program has not been adopted yet, but as a general rule, there is not a repetition as such of one topic from one work program to the other.
Okay, thanks. So I just received the question from Mariana. I'm curious if there are factors to show citizen science over crowdsourcing in your proposals, and do you tend to differentiate the two methods or underline their common elements? Anyone, please raise your hand. Florian.
Sure. I mean, for us, crowdsourcing and citizen science are not the same. It could be, but in citizen science, it's a key element that there is a research question, yeah, or a hypothesis, or at least a research goal, which isn't necessary for a crowdsourcing project. Or so this is the difference for me. And which method I choose, it depends very much on the project and the proposal and the question behind it. Or so that's my quite easy answer to that.
I also think the question very much relates to what we discussed before. So for companies, etc., it's often about crowdsourcing and less about research questions. So maybe goes rather in this direction. Anyone else who wants to add something on this question? Annelies.
Yeah, a bit in line of what Florian said, but the most important is that you look at what your project needs. Does it need crowdsourcing, or does it need citizen science? Does it need a full co-creation trajectory with 5 people who really dive in really deep, or do you need 20,000 people just putting up a sensor in their window? It's not that the one is more important or more worth than the other one. It's just what you need to answer your question or your need. And if it's crowdsourcing, then it's good, and then you should go for crowdsourcing, but start from your needs.
Absolutely. Thank you for the clarification. It's exactly what I meant to.
It's also a very good recommendation for any research proposal. Start with your needs and then design your proposal, I guess. So I think we have time for one last question to the entire panel. And I would choose the question. So what about a more strategic question when it comes to how to design your citizen science project for a research proposal? So what kind of citizen science project is more strategic to engage in? Is it better to start over with something new, or engage in initiatives or associations which already exist? Again, the question could be, depends on your question. But again, John, maybe you're already nodding your head.
You preempted what I was going to say there, Tobias. I mean, I think the key thing here is to develop your approaches depending on the context and the existing state of the art in that particular discipline that you're looking at. I think, you know, in answering the last question, I think Florian and Annelies picked up that point as well. It just depends on your context, which will depend on your approaches, the types of locations you want to go into, etc., etc.
Katharina, maybe from your perspective, from a funding agency, is it something which is of relevance for deciding on proposals? If there already is an involvement in existing initiatives or associations, which of course makes it easier to engage with citizens, or does it really depend on the specific research project?
I think it's very, very difficult to reply this question like on a kind of more general level. I think it really depends maybe on the topic as well. But from experience, just what we have seen in successful proposals, it's really the way how the whole process is thought through. I mean, again, and I'm just repeating what other panelists have been saying. What is the need? How does it fit into the project? What kind of methodology is being used? So to what extent is the involvement of citizens thought through and in the proposal? What are the problems or challenges as well that you aim at addressing, and what is the need? What is the added value? So it's very, very difficult just to provide a kind of a general generic reply to that question. I'm sorry.
Florian, as far as I'm aware of, in your citizen science network, you have universities as partner, you have NGOs, all kinds of associations. So is there anything you can add on this question? Are there advantages for citizen science proposals to cooperate with existing initiatives and associations?
Yes, I think so. I mean, that's the whole purpose of our network, to learn from each other and to share resources, because resources are usually very limited, and we always advise to look around you and look for similar projects, apps or initiatives, because there is a lot out there which you maybe can use or for your project or cooperate with another project. Because app development, for example, is very, very expensive. And if there are already apps out there which are similar to that, what you need, then I would recommend to adapt this app and not develop something from scratch. And what we also recommend is that it's related to the topic. We recommend that you cooperate with interest groups that correspond to the target group of your project proposal, because this would enable a relative precise communication at the end, because it is very difficult, as I said, to build up a community at the beginning. So to sum it up, yes, we recommend to build on existing resources.
Katharina, I think you just received questions in the chat.
Yes, but this is not a question, unfortunately, I can reply to, because this is really a policy-related question, which is for my colleagues at the European Commission. And here, I mean, what I can just say, and I think we have seen that as well in the current work program, as well under Horizon, or in the current work programs under Horizon Europe, it's a complementary approach. So on the one side, you still have the mainstreaming of societal engagement in the topics and it being taken into consideration as an evaluation criterion, but at the same time you still have dedicated calls as well and topics on citizen science and yeah, to put in place key pillars of support for citizen science. So it let's say it goes hand in hand. It's complementary. And this is what we have seen so far. And of course, I can't say anything more for 2023, 2024, but this is the approach as it stands.
Thank you. And we have almost reached the end of our panel discussion. And I would ask all participants maybe that we close with some final remarks on funding, on successful strategies and funding applications for citizen science, which we haven't addressed so far. So, Marzia, out of the blue, any thoughts on that? Besides, good luck to everyone, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, so from the perspective of those who apply to funding, I think I really join Annelies in saying that it's really important that you make it relevant to you, and that you spend time thinking also about what is the methodological approach that best fits to you. We have sometimes researchers that come to us and they really think they really wish to do citizen science, but then when thinking about it, maybe also other approaches, other citizen engagement approaches might fit better. And I think that the Commission has been supporting a very broad variety of ways to do citizen engagement, sometimes different ways of doing co-design or co-creation can also work. So if what motivates you to go into citizen science is the citizen engagement aspect and all the richness that the citizen engagement can bring to your process, including strengthening the societal relevance, etc., then go with the citizen engagement idea in mind and then see what is the approach that fits best for you. And I know the citizen science is often very tempting because it brings data, but it's sometimes maybe not the most easy to implement. So I think you really need some reflection because before just saying, okay, I want to do citizen science. And then if you decide to go towards the citizen science, I think that it's really important to be aware of the challenges that you might face. I think today we haven't really talked about, or we just mentioned briefly, data quality and the data validation of what you will be collecting, but it's still a big issue out there that is still slowing down, I think, a lot the uptake of a lot of citizen science initiatives. I'm thinking, for example, about a big one that just happened here in Brussels about the measurement of air quality. That has been very, very interesting, very powerful, but there are now no clear information at all about how all this has been used. So you have 3,000 people living in Brussels, including myself, for example, who now have better information about the quality of their where they live or where they work, but then what happens? So I think yeah, this is the type of reflections that you really need to think about when you decide to go into this really great adventure.
Yeah, I'm sure the data quality is a topic for an own webinar and citizen science projects. But Annelies, do you want to continue with some closing remarks?
Yeah, I think my main message would be don't give up. I know finding funding is really difficult. It's a challenge and there's low succeeding percentages and all, but don't give up. Just keep looking. Look for support wherever you can get it and open up your perspective. Don't just try to wait for a citizen science call to come along. Look at other possibilities for funding, because in the end, I think all of the projects we've talked to about their experience with citizen science after they've done it, it's fun, you enjoy it, it's just great to do. So if it fits your project and you think it's something for you, just try to find a way for yourself to make it work, and yeah, let people help you do that.
John, anything to add?
I mean, I guess there's one thing that's not been talked about very much, and obviously I'm coming at this from a university perspective, and where citizen science is strongest in my institution and many other institutions, particularly in the UK, are in computer science departments, because it's often about sort of app development and stuff like this. And my plea would be, don't leave it to the computer scientists. This is about interdisciplinarity. This is about social scientists, people that do arts and humanities type research, working with those with their technological skills to develop, you know, truly interdisciplinary citizen science projects.
Thank you, John. Florian?
Yeah, I mean, when you're planning a citizen science project, please have a look at all the guidelines. There are so many guides out there and collections of guides on EU citizen science, for example, but also there are a lot of national citizen science networks in Europe. Have a look at their websites. They for sure have guidelines there. And I also can recommend the book, The Science of Citizen Science, based on a cost action on citizen science. This gives a really good overview on the topic of citizen science. So if you're planning a project, have a look at all these guidelines and books out there. And this book I showed you is open access. So it's a Springer book and you can download it for free.
Maybe you can briefly post the link or later send it around. Would be great. Katharina, any closing remarks on the session when applying citizen science project?
Not necessarily for applying, but I really would like to close the circle and go back to something that Annelies said at the very beginning, which I think is a very important point as well. It's about education as well of the reviewers, which is important as well from our side, because of course we rely on external reviewers, external experts to evaluate the proposals that we are getting. So maybe as well, let's say here it's a kind of encouragement or invitation to researchers and to experts to sign in the EMI database as well for researchers that are willing to undertake the evaluation of proposals as well. We're always looking for new profiles and new researchers with the relevant expertise. So I just wanted to bring that up. I can share the link as well. Thank you.
So have a look at what has already been done, basically, what's going on. So thanks to all panelists, thanks to all participants. And in the end, we precisely will do that. We give the floor to one project which is already out here, which is already existing. One of the organizers of this webinar, it's the UTOPIA project. Please, floor for a final presentation. And from my side, thanks to everyone. Have a nice week and thanks for your participation.
Yes, as we're running to a close, thanks again to all the panelists for your very valuable contribution, for the participants for being here. As mentioned, this webinar was organized together with UNICA in the framework of the UTOPIA Train project. So if you're a member of an UTOPIA partner university and you're interested in joining our community of practice on citizen science, you can send me an email. I put my email address in the chat. We will keep organizing activities like this, webinars, but also workshops and peer learning sessions. If you're a member of the community of practice, we keep you informed, we share resources. And also in the framework of the UTOPIA Train project, we're working very hard on writing a plan for support centers for citizen science or support service, education support service for citizen science within the UTOPIA member universities. So if you'd like to remain informed about that as well, drop me a line. My email address is in the chat. Thanks for participating. Thanks again to all our wonderful panel members, our panelists, and thanks to Laura Colò from UNICA for co-organizing this with me. And I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon and hope to see you again.
Thank you again. Bye.